morning, everyone. My name is MOHAMED ELHAG. I'm Principal Management Consultant with Atkins Management Consultancy, and I'm also an Associate Business and Process Advisors with MEKEI. Hopefully I'm going to bring a different flavor today. I'm coming basically from management consultancy world, the corporate world. And throughout the years, I've worked in a number of organizational transformation projects. Very recently, mainly within establishing knowledge management frameworks for various pharmaceutical, local governance, central governance, and so on. And knowledge management as a project seems to be one of the most challenging projects that we do face in the consultancy side for various reasons. From the start, there is no common agreement on what is knowledge management. On the other hand, there is no proper academic basis for module that would help the industry basically to identify and develop and roll out knowledge management frameworks. Therefore, there is a very high failure rates for this type of projects. Would anyone be able to guess what is the failure rate for deploying knowledge management projects? Can anyone have a guess?
98%.
How much, sir?
98%.
98%. It's not as bad as that, because otherwise you wouldn't get the proper investment. I've done lots of research to try to find sort of like a proper solid academic basis to say what is the exact failure. There is some work is being done on both the corporate side and within the management consultancy industry as well as the academia. And the most conservative rate I found, it was 50%. So 50% of the knowledge management projects actually do fail. Why they do fail? For various reasons. And again, depending on the very particular project, why it's failed, someone get blamed here or there. It could be someone from the leadership, someone from the support services, and so on. So what I'm trying to do today is basically to look at what we've identified throughout the year in terms of, what are the common sort of like patterns for failures for knowledge management projects, and how we can try to overcome these challenges. So generally, to start with something which is, I always like to start with this when anything to do with knowledge management, because what is knowledge management? If you Google the word knowledge management, you would probably have over 200 description of what is knowledge management. The technical word, think of knowledge management in a certain concept. On the HR and the human side, people think of it in a totally different way. And if you go as far as those excellence model like AFKM and so on, they think about it in a different purpose. Within the project management arena, they think about it in a various way as well. So this is one of my favorite descriptions of knowledge management, and I'm gonna read it out loud. So knowledge management is the behaviors, the processes, standards, and technical solutions that allow you to share and use knowledge to support organizational strategic goals. So everything from individual behaviors all the way to systems being in place to business processes, which basically would support the organization to utilize the knowledge assets and enrich the internal knowledge sharing. So in terms of the issues that we feel, or the issues which is normally is the really stop knowledge management from going ahead. We've highlighted few issues here, which is basically, it's purely based on the experience and the reading that we've done. And one of the key one, the alignment with the strategy. So aligning knowledge management initiative with the strategy for the organization is key. So what we have here, normally, that you would have an organizational strategy, it could be driven, for example, in public sectors by, like government agenda. In private sectors, it could be, by the shareholders and so on. And it could be also there is some sort of like, regional, international laws, regulations and so on that drive the formation of an organization strategy. When it comes to knowledge management strategy, it should really be formed in a way to serve the organizational strategy, to help the organizational strategy to achieve its goals. What we see normally in the industry, you would have a CAM practitioner who would come in and create and develop a knowledge management strategy without really looking at the relationship between the knowledge management strategy and the overall organization strategy. And once a knowledge management strategy is basically formed properly, then it should be cascaded down to a number of activities and ongoing processes and so on to support the organization. So this is one of the initial alignment issue that we face.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Go on.
Did you recognize security of information as one of the failure of
It is coming in another one later. So for people who's familiar with organizational management systems, for organization who has management system, because many of the organizations actually they don't have like an agreed overall management system. And what is management system is basically is the guidelines for how the organization is operated. So things like the formal organization chart, the internal policies, the adopted standard being technical or otherwise, the processes, the procedures, and the various guidelines from the particular industry related to the organization. Normally, when you deploy a knowledge management initiative, you should really tailor it to fit within the management system for that organization. You shouldn't really sort of like bring something which is totally different. If you try to deploy it from a process perspective and so on, it doesn't fit in. And again, this is one of the key failure areas that we've seen in knowledge management projects. Alignment with quality and excellence. So various organizations, and I've seen this a lot in the Middle East actually, they have lots of ambitions for certifications and recognitions. So you would have, for example, the AFQM, the Excellence Model, the European Framework for Quality Management, and it has a knowledge management requirement there. And so often, knowledge management framework get deployed without proper alignment within these standards, although the organization is already adopting the standard. The ISOs, generally, whether the quality standards, ISO 9001 or the information security, ISO 27000, in some organization it is deployed, but again, when people sort of like initiate the framework for the knowledge management and deploy the proper processes and procedures and so on, it's not in alignment with what's already adopted within the organization. And that applies to the various ISO standards, including information security. Investors in people is something that people, it is widely used in the UK and adopted, but it started to be recognized more internationally recently. And it's basically is to do with how good the organization in investing within the learning aspect for people to actually achieve its strategic goals. And it has some knowledge management aspects as well. And again, often knowledge management framework get deployed without proper benchmarking against what's happening internally within the organization. The SIPS, the famous procurement standard, again has a certain knowledge management requirement, and again you would find organization who has already done so much work in implementing SIPS standards without really aligning properly within with the appropriate elements within the knowledge management. So when it comes to things like knowledge related to their experience with buying and selling, and good experience and bad experience, and internal lessons learned from that, they would have totally different procedures which overlap with what a knowledge management initiative could introduce. The OPM3, which is the PMI standard for measuring the maturity for organization from a project management perspective, has lots of requirement for lessons learned throughout the project. So it's basically, we've done this project, we're finished, we're going to the next project, what we have learned. And again, you would see overlap, but quite often, I've seen actually some organization where they would have 2 or 3 of these standards deployed already, and they would come and start a knowledge management initiative without really going and see what's really deployed within the organization, how we can deploy a knowledge management framework to fit in well within these standards. HR is a key issue. So within knowledge management, there is the softer side. So when it comes to things like shadowing, the actual overall thinking in terms of knowledge sharing and things like that, the HR actually has a great role. And they might already have programs for things like succession planning, job rotations, and so on, which could really be aligned very well with the adopted knowledge management framework, and often that doesn't happen. The PMO, as I mentioned, there is a lessons learned aspect. There is the entire project informatics in terms of the records for their risk, their quality, and their configuration management, and the change management aspect of it as well. And again, this has key learnings to be circulated within the organization every time they do similar project. And again, that's another challenging area. Performance management. That's one of, actually, I've never seen this happen anywhere. I've never seen a single organization who actually managed to align the performance management of the KM properly with the overall performance management system for the organization. So as we know, normally a performance management framework would be driven from the strategic objective on a yearly basis. A department would say, okay, this is the initiative that we are doing, and this is the business as usual activities that we are doing, and these are the performance targets, and then they would measure themselves accordingly.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry.
yeah, go on.
You stated something very, very important.
Yep.
But the question is why? Why you haven't seen, this alignment with it's a very, very important issue.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. To be honest, it varies from organization to another organization. You would have, there is the silo mentality, and that's normally there is the internal politics. There is in the Middle East, I've seen like, this is my initiative, that's your initiative, sort of things, and you would see 2 competing initiatives, although they could really merge together very well if the people really just sit down, look what are they trying to achieve as an organization, and work together to align their efforts. So yes, the silo is one reason, but there is hundreds of reasons why people resistance to change. That's a critical one as well. But that phase, let's say the majority of the transformation initiative, knowledge management normally has higher degree of resistance because the concept itself is quite new. Not many organizations actually, sort of like brave enough to introduce the concept of knowledge management.
But I think it's mainly because countries over there, in developing countries are not countries of data culture, and that's very important. It's the data infrastructure, the data interchange, the comprehensiveness of the data, and that's why you don't see it. That's the reason, because it's a big wall. In developing countries,
yep.
There is no investment in data.
There is, but to be honest, just to be fair to the developed countries, even developed countries,
Relatively.
Yeah, even developed countries, I've seen very similar issues. So I mean, I've worked in knowledge management framework for people like the BBC to help their reporters share information. Johnson & Johnson's in the US, the pharmaceutical companies, so basically to help the researchers exchange data related to their research and the proper addressing of dictionaries and things like that. And although the severity might differ depending on the maturity of the country and the organization within that country, the overall symptoms, they are very, very similar. So you guys look at time. So it's basically on a performance management framework, the KM activities should really be addressed as part of the yearly planning. So you know what initiative we are doing this year, what business as usual activities that we are doing, what is the resources needed, what is the budget. And from that, you know, when we have KPIs to actually measure the performance of a knowledge management initiative within an organization, that those KPIs should really be aligned to the same structure the performance management framework works in that organization. So you know, if we have sort of like 2 tiers, KPIs or PIs and KPIs and overall index and things like that, it should really follow the same structure. And at the end, the overall KM performance management framework should not be really something different. It should be embedded as part of the knowledge management framework, of the organization performance management framework. Very quickly, I'm just going to take you through some examples of you know, various knowledge management initiatives, and I think that this would probably be quite relevant to people who's not familiar with this type of initiatives. So we have the Improvement and Development Agency. It is a government agency here in the UK, and they've started an initiative to create communities. It's communities of practice and communities of interest, and it's basically to bring practitioners from the various government entities as well as individuals of interest to work together collaboratively on an online platform to basically resolve various issues. So there is, you know, waste management, community of practice, sustainability, and so on. Another example, this is a famous pharmaceutical company, and what they did basically, they established what they've got, it's basically yellow pages, but what they've called yellow pages, blue pages, you know, visual form, which is basically they've set up an online platform to bring the information about all their employees as well as the external expert, so they can, in terms of reaching and knowing who knows what, become a little bit easier. The United States Army is always one of the key leaders when it comes to knowledge management. They've established a performance management framework to basically measure the performance of the key personnel within their knowledge management unit. The DVLA, over here, it's the agency which is basically involved in licensing drivers and vehicles. At the 70s, these guys had key challenges because so many people were about to retire. And what they really did, they looked for a way to capture the local knowledge, because the DVLA has lots of offices all over the UK, and people within those offices, they had, you know, the local knowledge in terms of like when we're gonna have rush and so on. It's like, and then, so what they did, they started a job rotation where they took some of their junior staff and rotated them over the, you know, various areas where there was sort of like knowledge gap or knowledge transfer risk. The Department of Municipal Affairs in Abu Dhabi, again, this was one of the shining examples when it comes to online platform for knowledge collaboration. So it's basically, there was over 5,000 employees, and they've established what they've called the Musharaka platform, which is basically an online platform that bring practitioners together. So HR from the various entities, they come together in terms of lessons learned and things like that. And it was one of the, probably from a technology perspective, it was one of the most complex solutions to be deployed within that region indeed. The land registry, again, they've created you know, sort of like common portal to basically exchange their ideas, news, and things like that, and they've combined some of their internal portals as well. I'm gonna go through this quickly. So that's another strategy consultant, and they've built basically a platform to share their internal knowledge. The US Army, again, Accenture, and the UK government setting up standard for information classifications, and so on. So all of these is basically good examples of how knowledge management can work. What they all fail to deliver basically is to deliver a fully integrated knowledge management framework. what they've looked for, areas where they can have some quick wins, and they've deployed it, and it did work. Okay. However, it's not really bringing the maximum benefit that you can get. So what are we proposing, or what we thought is like could really work is like to really treat the organization, for me as a car. The organization is very complex, and there is lots of internal dependencies. If one part doesn't work, the entire thing doesn't work. And in terms of aligning strategic direction, leadership, the effective operation, they make sure that knowledge management actually fit in with all of these aspects. So what we advise for integrated knowledge management framework is basically to make sure that we integrate with the organizational strategy, we integrate with international best practices in terms of what's happening on the KM arena, integrating people with process and technology. Do not really deliver technology platform that no one uses or doesn't reflect the business process. And finally, integrating with the excellence standard. So at MEKEI, we've actually developed a model to take KM practitioner through the formation of knowledge management framework. It's based on people, process, technology, and information management, and it goes through various project phases. And what it does basically, it looks at the direction and the guide from the organization itself to form KM strategy. Then from that knowledge management strategy, basically, it gives you the tools to select what is the appropriate component that would deliver benefit for you as an organization, then the proper support to support as well. So the summary, KM is really very, very challenging and very complex type of projects. I've never seen anything more complex to deploy or more risky than knowledge management project. Sustainable knowledge management would really support organizational excellence if we do it properly and in an integrated way. Then alignment is success. So alignment between those components, if we have multiple KM initiatives, we need to make sure that they do serve each other. Alignment with organizational drivers in terms of what that organization needs to achieve rather than just having a knowledge management initiative for the sake of it. Then alignment with international best practices. And that's it for me.
Thank you.